Welcome to another edition of the ADP Show. That's Ryan McDowell. I'm Dan Myler. We're both members over at DynastyLeagueFootball.com. Ryan, of course, a partner. Myself, Dan, I'm a senior writer. And Ryan, you're the guy that collects the ADP. You've been doing it for a real long time.
Yes, I have. Yeah, this is years and years of ADP data that we've built up, and we've got that all on display over at the site. And lots of tools we've built from that and including that, and we're going to dive into one of those today.
Yeah, we've collected all that data, or really it's been you that has collected all of that data, and we thought once again we'd put it to good use with another episode of the ADP Show. For those of you that are new to the show, we look at that data that Ryan collects over at DynastyLeagueFootball.com and take a little angle towards it, spend 10 or 15 minutes talking about a topic inside of ADP, whether it be startup ADP or rookie ADP, whatever it may be. Today's topic, Ryan, is that startup ADP and some of the biggest risers from April to May.
Yeah, we've got, as I said earlier, we've got some different tools that incorporate that ADP. I know a lot of our users, once that new ADP is posted each month, they just go check that out. But that data is also incorporated into some different player value tools. One of them is really just aptly named the change in player value. So it's a quick and easy way to see how players' value has changed over time. And there's a nice I don't know, ticker there, I guess, a scroller. I don't know what it's called. I don't design these things, but you can adjust the settings and check the value as far back as the beginning of a player's career years and years ago. What I did today is just looked at the change in player value over the past month. So comparing April startup ADP to our current May startup ADP and looking for those the 5 players who were the biggest risers over that time. And Dan, as you could probably guess, a lot of those were related to the NFL draft.
Yeah, that's what makes it so much fun and such a great topic for right now, because there was a drastic change in values over the last month or month and a half here because of the NFL draft. And there's a couple running backs right off the top, Ryan, that saw they saw a big change in their value. They jumped up real high because they didn't see a lot of competition into that backfield, at least not early in the draft.
Right. And what I really like about this tool, what we used to do years ago is on our ADP data report page, we would show the change from month to month, how many positions a player had gained or lost since the previous month. And I'm not sure how much that number really meant, because if you're talking about a player like our top value riser this month, it's Miles Sanders. So Miles Sanders has already been valued as a second or third round startup player. It's going to be hard for him to see a real big gain. He's not going to suddenly jump up around. Other players could jump 2, 3, 4 rounds if they're far enough down the draft. So what this tool does, this change in player value tool, it basically takes into account the higher the player is in our ADP, the more a jump really becomes important. So, for example, Miles Sanders, he only jumped 5 positions in ADP. He was 20.7 in April, 15.7 in May. But that is such a significant jump because he is one of those top 20 players that he becomes our top value gainer. He gained 48 points in value over that time. And as you said, of course, that has a lot to do with the Eagles not drafting a running back. There was a lot of concern that they might do that, add some competition for Sanders. That didn't happen. We saw Carlos Hyde recently sign with the Seahawks. So there was also thoughts that he might sign with the Eagles. So there's a couple of bullets to dodge still left out there. LaShawn McCoy rumors, things like that. But right now, Miles Sanders is looking like a locked-in RB1.
Yeah, locked in RB1, and Dynasty owners everywhere are really locked into him now as that guy that they can depend on, and showing that ADP in the 15-16 range. Certainly a guy that we're all depending on as our RB1 moving forward. Another running back that didn't get a lot of competition in the NFL draft, and certainly has his front office's tip of the cap as the starter and the guy that they're going to lean on, is Austin Ekeler, who in April had a 28.5 ADP, jumped up a couple spots once again, and that really showed another significant value change.
Right. Only moved up 2 spots, as you said, or essentially 2 spots, 28.5 to 26.2. But that's enough to make him our second biggest value gainer in the month. And I should clarify, these are veterans. So most of our top risers from April to May were those rookies who, now that we suddenly know their landing spots, their draft capital, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was certainly the top overall riser. But in this episode, we're focusing on those players with NFL experience. And Austin Ekeler is the second riser of that group. I'm a little bit surprised to see this, honestly. You mentioned adding some competition. They did draft Joshua Kelly in the later rounds. Already some buzz on him that he could, at the very least, be part of that committee along with Ekeler. I didn't expect Ekeler to be a riser in May, so it was a little surprised with that data.
Yeah, and some of our listeners or some of those watching this, Ryan, might be scratching their heads and saying to themselves, wait a minute, moved from 28.5 to 26.2, and that I guess grades out as a 42 value change, a plus 42, moves up drastically. But again, it's because he's seen as a first 3-round startup pick. He's so high up there that moving up those 2.5 spots, it really indicates a drastic move because of everything you just said. Let's move on to the third biggest riser, Ryan. We jump over to the wide receiver position, and a guy that I've talked a lot about, that's Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. Another guy that moves up pretty significantly just on ADP alone, going from 39.5 all the way up to 32.7. So hopping up there 7 spots, moving from that 4th round into the 3rd round in startup ADP, Ryan. He moves up. He gets a value change bump, a relatively significant one as well.
He does. And moving up those essentially 7 spots, basically about half a round in our ADP data. I'm again a little surprised with this one. I think what we're seeing, not necessarily a result of the NFL draft. I don't think the Bears were really expected to add a top receiver early. They didn't. We know the Bears earlier in the offseason added Nick Foles. I don't think that's really viewed as a huge boost for that offense in general. I think what this comes down to, and this is probably partly the case with really Ekeler and Sanders as well, is just talk around the community. You look at that ADP of that previous ADP of Allen Robinson at 39.5, and he just looks like a steal in that early 4th round range. And basically analysts and dynasty players just talking up a player, kind of being at the front of our minds, can sometimes impact that dynasty ADP. And I think that's what's happened with Allen Robinson here.
Yeah, that happened indeed. A wide receiver that certainly makes sense being a big riser is DJ Moore. He comes in 4th on this list. Another guy that was seen already as a 2nd round investment in startup drafts, Ryan. He jumps up a couple spots from 17.5 to 15.3, a value change of 19. So another guy that has been on the tips of dynasty analysts' tongues, certainly on the minds of dynasty owners, a guy that you want on your roster and you want to be depending on in 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, Moore is such a hot name in dynasty right now. I won't be surprised at all if we start seeing him crack the 1st round of startup drafts, both in our mock draft data and as well as actual drafts happening around the dynasty community. He's not the most valuable player right now. I mean, he's not in that 1st round range yet, but I think he could be maybe the player that's the hardest to acquire. You're just not going to be able to trade for DJ Moore at kind of that market value. You're going to have to overpay because there is that expectation really from almost everyone, it seems, that he's going to be valued as that top 5 wide receiver, that top 12 overall pick in the very near future.
Yeah, and then finally, the fifth guy, Ryan, that cracks the list, the top 5 value change risers, according to DLF ADP from April to May, is we got to dip down a little bit lower in ADP. We were talking about top 3 round type talent over the first 4 players, Ryan, but we go a little bit farther down the list than a guy that was impacted by the NFL draft for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a good example. I talked about when you see those big jumps later in a draft. This is an example of that. It's Matt Breda. We know the story, traded from the 49ers to the Miami Dolphins on draft weekend. The Dolphins didn't really address that position through the NFL draft as many expected. They signed Jordan Howard earlier in the offseason. They make the trade for Breda. It looks like that's going to be the committee for 2020. And as a result of that trade, that new landing spot, Breda jumped up 50 spots. He goes from 181.2 to 131.2. But again, it just shows the significance of a smaller jump earlier in the draft. Sanders, Ekeler, Robinson, Moore, all of those guys viewed as top 3 or 4 round startup picks, and a jump of 2, 3, 5 picks in the top 4 rounds is worth as much or more as a 50 spot jump later in the draft.
You know, the Breda's name popping up on this list is an intriguing one, Ryan, because he moves from somewhere with a cluster of running backs where we just didn't know what was going to happen to now Miami, where there's just a few names, and there certainly seems to be an opportunity. Dig in a little bit more with Matt Breda and that big jump. What are Dynasty owners excited about with him moving on to Miami that would bring him up 50 spots in ADP?
Well, I think there's always been a lot to like about Breda. I mean, he's kind of earned that reputation as one of the toughest players in the game. You know, it always seems like he's banged up, has some kind of injury to deal with, but he never really misses time. He always trots back out on the field and has produced. He did get lost a little bit in that San Francisco backfield in 2019 because we saw Mostert produce. We saw them go out and sign Tevin Coleman in that previous offseason, and there just became too many bodies in that backfield. So I was actually kind of hoping it would be Tevin Coleman that would be the one let go or sent packing, but instead it was Breda. As I said, landing with Miami, it's basically he and Jordan Howard because they had nothing following that 2019 season. Just really had no options last year. So with Jordan Howard, I think I still view Howard as kind of the lead guy in that committee, but I think Dynasty players were ready to pounce on that situation. Like I said, we thought maybe they would spend a first or a second round pick on the running back spot. When they didn't, instead they trade a later pick. Instead of jumping on that rookie, we're just jumping on Matt Breda and seeing him really gain some value.
Yeah, well, he's gaining value, but I think most Dynasty owners, most savvy Dynasty owners at least, are aware that it could be a short-term option. They could be dipping back into that younger player pool a year from now at the position. So, Ryan, we covered these risers this week. We're going to be back again next week, and we'll cover the fallers, the 5 players that fell, according to this value change, the most from April to May, according to DLF ADP. We appreciate you guys watching the ADP show presented by DynastyLeagueFootball.com. Be sure to check out everything that we offer over at DLF. Lots of those tools that Ryan talks about, the ADP that we talked about today, and then there's new content hitting the site every single day. Hit like, hit subscribe. I'm Dan. That's Ryan. Thanks for watching the ADP show. We'll catch you again next week.